So let's start
One
this
of
session. So yeah, go ahead, Shobhit.
no, one of the things I wanted to point out is because Power Platform, Dynamics 365, we keep releasing stuff like so fast that it is very difficult to keep up to date to all those things. So one of the things that I think is quite helpful is there is a release planner available. I don't know if you are aware of that or if like, people on the call are aware of that. There's a publicly available release planner on releaseplanner.microsoft.com, whereby you can see all the features that are going to be released or the timelines associated to that. You can in fact create your own releases so that you can then, if you are acting like as an administrator in your own organization, you can then publish those releases within your organizations on your Power Platform organization itself. So
Yeah.
that I find is quite useful and a handy sort of a tool.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have a link to it, drop it in the chat, or
Absolutely.
even better, like once I hand over to you, Shobit, maybe you can just quickly show us what it looks like. I've used that with some of my clients, and you're right, because it will focus what they're interested in. Because if you look at the release notes, man, it covers everything, like thousands and
Absolutely.
thousands of features, and it goes into like the entire stack of the Power Platform, Power Pages. It goes into Dynamics 365. It goes into Finance and Operation, Business
Mhm.
Central, and so on. And sometimes not all of it is relevant to you. So you want something that is a little bit more focused. My
Absolutely.
customers tend to want to go through those release notes so that they can understand what's coming up as they do
Mhm.
their early upgrades, and also to go and test the functionality and make
Yeah.
sure there's no regression issues, nothing is broken. And there's a few things that are worth mentioning that may break things, so something to consider in there. But yeah,
Absolutely.
anyway, today we're going to talk about what's new in Wave 1 2024, covering both the Power Platform and Dynamics 365. I am Rami. I'll be your host for today. I'm joined by Shobhit Bhatnagar, who's one of my favorite friends working at Microsoft, who used to work with me in the past at DXC. Shobhit, you want to introduce yourself? Tell us what you do at Microsoft.
Sure, Rami. Thanks so much for having me here, and it's I'm glad to be back. So, hi everyone, I'm Shobhit. I am a cloud solution architect on Power Platform at Microsoft, and what that means is that I work with a lot of customers within Australia and New Zealand to help them on their Power Platform journey, specifically around some of the governance and the analytics sort of perspective for Power Platform. So I'm here to sort of talk about some of the new features that have come into Power Platform or are coming into Power Platform as part of Wave 1 between now and September, I think. That's the time frame. Yeah, so
Yep.
happy to be here.
Yeah, so some of those features have already been enabled, and maybe we'll be able to demonstrate them today. Some of them are going to get into public preview shortly. So what I would say is keep an eye on build. So build is happening in May, I think mid-May or towards the end of May. And they usually, a lot of those features that are either going GA or are about to go into public preview will be announced around the build timeframe. So keep an eye on the conference. In fact, the next session that we'll do at the user group is going to be a build after party. So all the information that will be shared during the build event, we will go and share with you guys so that you have a concentrated view of what's new in the Power Platform. But for now, let's stick with Wave 1 2024. What I like to do is to start with a summary. So as an MVP and Shobhit as a Microsoft employee, we do get access to those release notes maybe 1 or 2 weeks before they're actually published. So that gives us the opportunity to go and read them, understand what's in them, and also do a little bit of analysis on how we want to amplify that message. So one thing that I do typically is to go through the actual different events, the different capabilities that are in there, and then do a little bit of analysis just to see how many features are going to be included in the Power Platform, how many features are going to be included in Dynamics 365, the Dynamics 365 ecosystem. Recently, they've been introducing a lot of copilot capabilities. So I go and do an analysis into each one of those set of release notes and see how much of those individual features that will be released are AI related. And what I've seen is that typically it's around the 15, 16%. So this is what we're seeing recently in those release notes. And then I go and have a look at every one of those disciplines and see how many pages have they covered part of those features and how many features are included in those specific elements. The reason why I do pages versus features is to see sometimes they may be less features, but they spend too much time talking about them, which means that they have a little bit more weight if you want. So if you look at Copilot Studio, for example, we probably have less features that have been announced part of Copilot feature, but there's a lot of documentation around them that shows you how excited Microsoft is about all of those capabilities. Whereas maybe something like AI Builder, you would have like little paragraphs saying, we're releasing this, and this is just an incremental of the existing portal. There's no surprise, lots of focus on AI capabilities, Copilot capabilities. Power Pages, Power Automate, Dataverse do get a fair amount of support. Power Apps being the most on the Dataverse side, and then governance and administration is also very important. Whereas on the other side, you will notice that it's mainly dominated by things like finance and operation, Business Central, so those ERP systems, but also things like customer service, field services, sales are equally as important. That also gives you a bit of understanding on where there's less investment or where the products are relatively small. So for example, guides and human resources are some of the smaller solutions that are delivered part of Dynamics 365. That might give you an indication that this is something new that they're starting the investment in or that they're ramping down the investments in. In both those cases, it's actually something that is relatively new, relatively small, and then they're ramping up the investment in those areas. But the main focus are in the traditional either ERP or what we call the CE stuff, so the sales and the customer service and field services, so the traditional Dynamics 365 first-party apps. Of course, there's no, they're not shy in introducing Copilot capabilities in there. So you'll see a lot of Copilot mentions, 418 on the Dynamics 365 side, and then 256 on the Dataverse side. Things do change over time, so sometimes they go and update those release notes, be it the PDFs or be it the actual the actual website. So keep an eye on it. I think when I first released my blog post about that, things have moved on a little bit, so some of the links might not be working. So that's a high-level analysis. With that, I'll hand over to you, Shobhit, to start talking about maybe the Power Automate capabilities.
Sure, Rami. Thank you. So I'm going to cover some of the newer capabilities that are coming through in the Power Automate world, right? So before actually sort of delve deep into what is coming up in the Power Automate side, just wanted to sort of highlight some of the key focus areas that Microsoft has around enhancing the capabilities within Power Platform, right? So the focus with the 2024 release wave one is on making the experience to build, troubleshoot, and manage automations easier for everyone. So be it the makers, administrators, or users. So for them to be able to build things easily using Power Automate, whether it's cloud flows or desktop flows, troubleshoot the issues and also manage those automations as we try to scale them up for an enterprise grade application. The second focus is on the scalability and privacy of the Power Automates, and the third major focus is on democratizing the process mining. Right, so we introduced these capabilities of process mining last year, and now the focus is to make this capability available to everyone by democratizing that. Right.
That's really good to hear, Shobhit, because I think the community has, voiced their opinion that some of the troubleshooting is different, and they want more insight and all of that. So it's great to hear that Microsoft is actually listening to the feedback and we're implementing on that.
Yeah. So based on the feedback as well as Amir rightly said, and based on the experience of Power Automate in the past, some of the other core investment areas were like invested on, of course, AI. So AI is the theme of for last year or so now. So a lot of investment has been done on AI within Power Automate, which means the Copilot for Power Automate is getting better and better. So the Copilot was introduced last year in Power Automate, and it was introduced alongside other capabilities of Power Automate, whether it's desktop or the designer and so on and so forth. But the capabilities are now increasing. So now, for example, you have inline a suggestion that can come in from a Copilot perspective. I will talk about that soon. There are also newer features announced both within the cloud flows as well as desktop flows, and also within process mining. Now you can actually look at data coming through from customers' data lake itself that can now be ingested into the process mining tool, right? So Rami, if you could go to the next slide. Right. So as Rami mentioned at the start, right, a lot of AI. But apart from a lot of AI, Power Automate is also introducing newer ways to connect to your data sources and applications. Right. So similar to how you can build an automation from a SharePoint list at this point of time, there is an automate work button that has now been introduced on the automate tab of Excel sheet, whereby you can automate using existing templates or build your own sort of Power Automate to automate some of the Excel work that is there. Right. So this is again an integration between a commonly used enterprise grade application like Excel with Power Automate. You can now also create Power Automate flows on files from within a Teams environment itself, or you can create a Power Automate flow from scratch if you need to. Now, at this point of time, or up until this point of time, when you create a Power Automate, you usually have to select the dataverse associated to the environment you are on. Now, there is this new capability which has been introduced whereby you can actually point to a different Dataverse environment as well from within your Dataverse connector, right? So you can now integrate using this cross Dataverse environment sort of collaboration if you want to, if you have to build any Power Automates to do cross Dataverse platform connectors. To bring all the applications together, we now have newer actions coming in within the Power Automate world, whereby if something happens in Power BI, for example, if a data alert is triggered in Power BI, you can actually run a Power Automate from a Power App based on that trigger, right? So think about the kind of scenarios that you can now you don't need to customize anymore. You can now build those scenarios from within the realms of Power Platform's out of the box capabilities itself, right? Similarly, you can take an action based on a workflow that is invoked from within a Power App. You can now take an action in your Copilot Studio. So you can connect your external users by taking an action, and then that action can be triggered from within a Power App as well. Now, from a maker's perspective, what are the new features, right? So as I said before, Microsoft is trying to invest in areas where the experience of building the Power Automate becomes easy. So now we have newer features like copy paste for container actions. So like you can copy paste the entire scope, conditions applied to each, and take it and create another sort of container action based on that. There is a simplified audit editor that is coming out specifically for actions like get actions and get files. So you can have a simplified audit editor available for that now. And you can also view two action panes simultaneously going forward within the Power Automate world. You also have AI-powered suggestion feature for next best action. Now, what that means is based on how your Power Automate is flowing, you can ask the Copilot to suggest what is my next best course of action. So it would start suggesting, okay, you should do this. For example, if you're downloading a file from Outlook, then it might suggest you an action saying that, okay, you might want to, upload this file onto OneDrive, for example, or something similar, right? So it can start suggesting you certain action to give you idea of what you should do next, and then you can decide whether you want to do that or not. One of the cool features, again, from a low code perspective, that is going to be quite useful for people like who are not so technical as such. There are a number of script actions that are available within Power Automate, right? So you can do PowerShell scripting, you can do Python, you can do JSON, and so on and so forth. Now you can talk to Copilot using natural language as to what you want to do, and in that particular action, the code will be generated for you, right? So that way, it actually helps people who are not so much from technical background, but have a lot of business knowledge and subject matter expert. They can come and build these Power Automates much more faster now. Ramesh, if you could skip to the next
Yep.
slide, please.
Absolutely. The only thing I want to add in here is that, again, Microsoft has listened, because if you follow the journey of the crawling, walk, and then running, we always said, oh, what we had in Power Automate is just you describe what you want and it gives you its best shot at it. And we said, we want more. Like, why do you have to only start with Copilot? Why can't you just use natural language as you're developing your Power Automate and have that prompt development? And that's exactly what they've done in there. So I love all of those capabilities, and it's going to turn into the future, especially when it comes to complex scripting and then writing those formulas. You don't know, you don't have to learn everything by heart. Typically you go and Google it, but now it's just, one natural language away. So that's really good progress.
Absolutely. And on top of that, as I was saying before, capabilities to help you once you have built your Power Automates, once you have added your automations, how do you manage your automations? How do you manage them without having to, worry about, oh, I only have 28 days of data and so on and so forth, right? So as of now, you can only see 28 days worth of run history on your Power Automate, and it is available for one Power Automate at a time. Now you can actually export your execution data into application insights and then build your own visuals on top of that to get an enterprise-wide understanding of how your automations are working. Within the Power Platform Admin Center, you also have a collected view of all your automation assets, which includes Power Automates, cloud flows, desktop flows, and so on and so forth, to monitor its performance at one single place. So you can understand what are the top trends, what kind of errors we are getting, which Power Automates are failing mostly, and what are the reasons why they're failing, right? So those top trends are available to you right within your Power Platform Admin Center now. One of the things that we get asked all the time is, licensing, right? How do we know what licenses would be required for a Power App or a Power Automate? So going forward, based on the actions and based on the volume of transactions that, based on the history of the Power Automate that is running, there can be intelligent license recommendation that can be provided to the administrator so that they can apply the correct licensing or change the licensing as they see the usage of Power Automate in future. So that is, I think, is a really cool feature. It's a small feature, but it's again a very cool feature. Based on the usage of Power Automate, it starts suggesting what kind of licenses might be better used for that Power Automate. One thing that Ravi just mentioned a couple of minutes ago is that a lot of time when we are building Power Automate, we actually Google a lot of stuff. So we try finding stuff from Google, whether this function is available in Power Automate or that is available in Power Automate, or how do I do this, and so on and so forth. Now you don't have to do that as well. So there is generative answers available right within the Power Automate, which uses the natural language again. So it is an AI powered copilot, which now uses or which now points to the product related or which is trained on product information now, which can provide you product related questions or answers to your questions related to the product right into the canvas itself. So you don't have to Google for a lot of things. So that's the idea behind that feature. Right. So next up for me is a very quick sort of a demo of one of the new capabilities that have come out around the new canvas or the new designer. But before I move there, Rami, do you have anything to add, or anybody has a question?
Yeah. Without turning this into a licensing session, there have been some recent changes in the Power Automate licensing scheme, and I think they had some relaxation of the licensing up until April, and now they're starting to reinforce it. But if you have a Power Automate that executes at very high rates and then does a lot of actions, typically we would recommend to go for a per flow license. Per flow license are not sold anymore, and now they've turned them into per process license. So you can have one business process that has multiple Power Automates associated with it, and then you would buy the number of processes that will give you X number of executions per 24 hours. And that way you can ensure that, yes, I do have high executing Power Automates, but there is like 10 of them. They're all part of the same process. So I'll buy one or multiple process licenses for them and then cover all the requirements in terms of how many executions we've got per day. And that will avoid throttling. Because if you don't look after don't have the right licenses in there, then your Power Automates will throttle. They'll stop until the 24-hour period is done, and then they'll trigger again. So something to keep in mind. I'll stop sharing and hand over to you, Shobhit.
Yeah, sure. So let me just go ahead and very quickly share my screen. Right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, awesome. Right, so this is the new Power Automate Designer. Some of you might have already looked at it or have started working on that, but it gets enabled by default in your tenancy as such. And again, my designer is a couple of steps ahead of from where you start. So you start off by, let's say, describing what you want, right? So you say describe to design. It is a feature which was introduced last year, which uses natural language and prompts to create a Power Automate flow, a draft of a Power Automate flow for you, right? As Ami said, Microsoft has listened a little bit more now and has now embedded Copilot right into the draft of a Power Automate Cloud Flow as well, so that you can expand on what has already been drafted for you. So you can now tell, or you can now converse with Copilot on a regular basis and keep changing your Power Automate Cloud Flow until you achieve what you really wanted to achieve. Right. So in this new designer, what you have is I have a couple of actions. So I have a trigger when a SharePoint item is created, send an email. It's just that, right? When I click on the action, you can see that the parameter pane opens on the left hand side, whereby it starts highlighting whatever is mandatory or required for this particular trigger or action to work. Right now, what Power Automate would try to do is it would try to insert to its best knowledge the parameters for you if it could find those parameters. So for example, any connections, it would try to do that on your behalf already. Anything else, I'll show that in the next section. For example, within an email, it could put like a draft subject and a draft body for you by default, and you can then modify it if there's a need to do that. So you can specify these parameters here. You can also go and see the code view if you want to understand what is happening behind the scene, or if you want to modify anything on that, you can actually go ahead and have a look at the code view and make those changes. Right. You can also set a number of different settings from within the left pane. So again, as you can see, it is less wobbly now than the previous designer, plus it is much more compact as well. What that means is if you have a very complex, huge, big flow, then you don't have to keep dragging down or up or try to go left and right to understand how your Power Automate flow is actually going, is working, right? You can actually see all that within the same canvas as such. Now, if I go collapse this one and I click on the next sort of parameter, you can see that it will try to fill. It has not done in this example. Some examples it does do that, where it can put like a brief subject and a body for you, and then you can specify the email address. You can also see that you can use now data from previous steps, and you can use expressions here. So you can directly add those expressions here, and it can again look at different types of expression that you can put in, or formula that you can put in using whatever is available. And you can also look at anything from the previous step if it's available. You can insert that as well in here. On the right hand side, you have the Copilot, so whereby you can ask Copilot to make any changes, remove any actions, or add new actions, for example. You can also Copilot to, if for example, if you're working on a Power Automate that was built by somebody else and you want to understand what this particular step or action does, you can actually ask Copilot to explain in natural language what that action does, so that you get an understanding of how a flow was designed in the beginning. Right, so that's the new sort of a designer. Any questions or comments?
I've noticed that there's a toggle that says new designer. So I'm assuming you can switch back to the old one. I know a few people in the community were complaining that the new designer may have some issues. My recommendation is give it a spin, play with it, if you face any issues, please raise them because Microsoft wants to know about them. Most likely, those issues are already on the radar and they already have a fix in mind. But just keep it coming because then you can amplify the message to say, this is broken and it is causing us grief.
Yeah, so there are absolutely there are certain known issues with the new designer, and some of those are actually documented on the MS Learn website as well. So there are a few scenarios in which the new designer might not work the way it is supposed to. But as Rami said, one, they are documented in MS Learn. Second, Microsoft is actively sort of working on that. So in upcoming releases, and those issues will be resolved. Okay, Rami, if you want to take over, you can.
Yep, we'll do that. All right, next slide.
Yep.
That's the designer.
Yeah, so I think I did cover all of it already. So just a couple of small additions to what I already covered is, as I said before, if you have like a huge complex Power Automate with the old designer or with the current designer, it would take a lot of time for you to go to the right place if you are sort of debugging or troubleshooting stuff. Now with the zooming controls available there and the cards being much more smaller in nature, you can actually find that stuff much more easily, and it also takes less time to load, so it is faster in terms of loading the whole Power Automate designer for you. Right. So that sort of brings me to the end of the Power Automate side. I will next cover the Copilot Studio related features. So Rami, if you could, yeah. Right. So from a Copilot perspective, again, I will briefly sort of talk about where Microsoft is trying to go. Right. So with Copilot Studio, what we are now trying to do is Copilot Studio is what Power Virtual Agents used to be. So they have been rebranded to be called Copilot Studio, and they do used to be part of Power Platform as such, but now we are treating that as its own product. And the reason for that is because with Copilot Studio, you can not just build Power Virtual Agents kind of chatbots, but you can also bring data from any other data source, and you can extend Microsoft 365 Copilot as well. So because of all those reasons, this is now going to be treated as its sort of an own product as such. And with that in mind, the major investment areas are on the AI innovation around the whole Copilot things. With that being said, there is a lot of investment that is happening on how you configure the Copilot as well, and how to make configuration and authoring of the Copilot quite seamless and easy for the makers. Uh, at the same time, there is a good amount of focus and investment that has been done on the service runtime and governance aspects of Copilot as well. So how do you sort of understand how your Copilot is performing? What kind of direction it is taking based on users' input, because a lot of Copilots will be built using generative AI from now onwards. So instead of having trigger phrases, it would rely on natural language. So how that natural language actually let Copilot do what it needs to do? Is it doing the right thing or going in a different direction? So understanding that is quite important for Copilot to be keep training and providing the right outputs back to the customer. One of the cool things that has happened with this release is with the voice interaction, which usually is the most natural way for anybody to communicate. The integration with the IVR and the omni-channel on customer service that has been introduced as part of this release. That is a very cool feature that has been released as well. Right. So if you move to the next slide, Rami, I'll just cover a few features. So again, from a innovation perspective, as I said, a lot of focus on AI. So we had generative actions, which was in preview for quite a while. So generative actions is where you can, based on the context of the conversation that the Copilot is having with your end users, it can understand what they want to do and take actions on their behalf. So for example, if on an e-commerce website, a customer is sort of, searching or browsing through a product catalog and is interested in buying a product, instead of them going and creating a product request or something like that, a Copilot can help them raise that request for them, right? Like do an order for them, for example, using generative actions. So that functionality is now in GA, right? So up until now, you have to do a lot of topics and trigger phrases to configure your Copilot Studio or your Power Virtual Agents previously. Now you don't have to rely on trigger phrases because it now relies on natural language to understand the context. Generative answers is now supported, is available in all supported language. So whatever Power Virtual Agents or Copilot Studio supports as a language, generative answers will start supporting that language as well. So whatever language you deploy your Copilot Studio in, generative answers will be able to understand that context and will provide the answers back to the users. There is generative AI insights, which is a new feature now introduced within Copilot Studio to understand the effectiveness of your Copilot. So I was alluding to that before, whereby you can have a Copilot Studio running and you wanted to understand how it is working so that you can improve its performance and improve its effectiveness. So AI-driven insights are going to be available now right on the Copilot Studio's sort of settings, or there's an analytics area available on the Copilot Studio now. The other thing is Azure OpenAI. You can now connect your data sources from external data sources as well, like for example your SAP or your Salesforce or your ServiceNow and so on and so forth to get generative answers. So you can use Azure OpenAI to connect through to your data and bring generative answers back into your Copilot as such. Any questions, comments, Rami, or?
No, nothing that I can see, but it's yeah, I mean, Copilot Studio is one of the big features that everybody's trying around. So definitely with playing around with it.
Yeah, one of the cool things I think, which I do want to call out is, as you can see in the create generative answers screenshot, you can now connect through to a data source, and that data source could be any website, whether it's internal or external facing website. So you can now connect to your public website, for example, and let your external users come and ask information from within the public website. So that way they don't need to click on different links or search within your website to find the relevant answers. The Copilot will do that for you, right? So that way it would save a lot of time from end users perspective, and hence your customer satisfaction would increase in that regard. The other bit is that when it surfaces any information from a particular source, it always cites that information as well. So it would provide the link to where it get that information from, so a user can actually validate that the information that they're getting is correct. Right. So that is a very useful sort of a construct that has been built using generative answers within Copilot. You can also connect to your internal knowledge bases like SharePoint and OneDrive. So instead of again having tons of documents available to your customer service agents, you can actually connect through to your knowledge base and use that knowledge base to get the information that is required, and your customer service agent can just ask questions in natural language to get those answers from those documents as well.
Yeah. So just around the external website, it's almost instantaneous. So the moment you say this is the external website, you can start using Copilot straight away because it's actually using the Bing indexing for anything that is public.
Yes, absolutely. And so for your internal SharePoint as well, because it uses SharePoint indexing and the Graph API, so it is also very fast. So as soon as you point your Copilot to a SharePoint website, for example, where you may be managing tons of documents for knowledge, for example, for your internal audience, you can actually see the results coming through very fast for that as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, if you could move to the next slide, please. Right. So just a couple of additional features from a Copilot Studio perspective. So Copilot being a SaaS product and always been a SaaS product, you can deploy that to multiple channels, right? So you could deploy a Copilot to Teams, you can deploy it to SharePoint, you can deploy it to an external website or an internal website, and so on and so forth. So some additional channels have now been added as well. So you can deploy it to an SMS channel or a WhatsApp channel now, or if you have a ACS chat enabled, and you can deploy your Copilot Studio to that as well. From a data protection perspective, we have this customer managed encryption keys available on Dataverse table previously. Now with the Copilot Studio as well, you can have your own keys. So customers can provide their own keys to manage to encryption of the data that they are sort of using. As I mentioned before, integration with IVR, with omni-channel for customer service, that has now been enabled as well. And then from a maker perspective, because we do want to be more convenient for Copilot to be built and deployed in multiple environments, the import export of topics is now available as well. So instead of you having to create topics every single time or find like an Excel separate Excel export and import, it is available within the product itself as well. Okay, with that being said, I think I'm done with what I wanted to cover. I'll hand over to you, Rami, unless there are any questions.
Can you check on the chat, because I'm presenting, I can't see the chat in there and I don't have a second screen, but if there's anything, if you can answer that. Cool. So for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to start with some high level coverage of the capabilities that are being released, and then once we're done with that, I may jump into a quick demo, and then I'll carry on with the first party apps for Dynamics 365 and what is included in there. Most of the slides are going to have a link to the actual feature announcement. I have the full URL in there, so if you want to take a screenshot and then use that, but otherwise I can share the presentation later. So let's start with the administration capabilities that are being released. So one of the things that they're doing is gradually getting rid of the old user experience that was introduced back in CRM 2011 and then replace it with the latest and the greatest. So one of the things that they are doing as an option that you can enable is to allow you to, from the Power Platform Administration Center in the environment settings, to go into the legacy configuration and settings, as opposed to having to go into an app, go into advanced setting in there, and then be able to see what's available in there. So they're gradually starting to move away from those old user interfaces. From a UI and UX perspective, we've seen a lot of changes in there. So the new look is the old nice and shiny way that the platform is going. They are trying to be consistent with the fluent design UI that is available in the rest of the Microsoft products. So they've changed the styling, the fonts, the drop shadows, the background colors, and so on. Again, trying to give you that familiar feel with the rest of the Microsoft products. And then we'll demonstrate that a little bit later. But also coming with that, with the new look and feel, they've introduced some Copilot capabilities. So now as you go into a model-driven app, or even in Canvas, you can include that, you would have Copilot on the right-hand side assisting you with the rest of the work that you're doing. So this is, I'm talking about using that from a Dataverse perspective or a pure Power Platform solution without a first-party Dynamics 365 app on top of it. However, if you do have a first-party app, then those capabilities are augmented significantly, and I'll talk about it in the second part of the presentation. They can do things like look at a specific account and give you a generated summary of all the information into that coming from that account, be it a lead, be it a contact, be it an account, be it a case, and so on. And what's really interesting is that not only does it look at the record itself and its surrounding or associated records, but it also goes through the documents that are associated with that record, any attachments that you've got in there, analyze what's in there, and then give you that summary back. So for example, in this screenshot, you can see an RFP document that it's summarizing. It could be, for example, an invoice or a contract or whatever it is. It will summarize the content of that document and then display it in the Copilot fashion. Similar to what we've seen before that Shobhit was demonstrating on the Power Automate side of things, they're introducing some autocomplete capabilities assisted by AI that will help you fill in information about an individual, for example. So as you move, you tab from one attribute to the other, it will automatically predict what the content might be in the other attributes, which is quite fascinating. From a offline perspective, so if you're working in the industry to do with agriculture, for example, or where people use mobile devices and get disconnected from the network, then they've done some significant enhancements in there where you can define exactly what tables and what columns specifically you can go and take offline, and then whether you need to synchronize it with Wi-Fi only, or whether it's capable of being synchronized with normal cell phone data as well. So it gives you more capabilities over the offline syncing options for the Power Platform. Cool. Shifting gears into data right now and having a look at what has been introduced in that space. The first one that I wanted to talk about is bypassing custom business logic. So this is actually an interesting one that was announced when we were at the MVP Summit. I talked to the product manager responsible for that, and I did not know that it was actually already announced in the under Learn. This is one of the examples where you can't find it in the release notes, but you will find it under the developer recommendation provided by Microsoft. What does that feature provide you is an option to go and say, as you're using APIs to go and do bulk updates, for example, or API calls to do a create, delete, update, whatever it is, CRUD operations, you can specifically pass in a parameter in your API to say bypass the business logic. So if you think about it, if you have a plugin associated with an event, like let's say every time I do an update, I do need to go and trigger a business logic plugin, then you can specifically say, I'm doing a data migration, and that data migration takes care of making sure that all the data is set up correctly. So I'm going to pass in a parameter to say, do not execute that specific business logic, be it a plugin or that specific step ID. So, a post event associated with, for example, an update. You can skip that logic and then force a massive data migration without having to manually go and switch them on and off. And if you think about it, that allows you to do a data migration while the system is live without having to alter the validity of the data and so on. Really cool feature, and I think it comes in really handy when you're doing big data enrichment and data migration for your platform. Sort of slightly related to that is so the capabilities that are available in the Power Platform, specifically on the maker side of things, to go and analyze your data and tells you how they are linked together. So with that specific capability, you can go into maker, into a specific table. You can say, show me the relationship, show me an ERD diagram related to that specific table, and it will show you what other entities it's related to and what are the cardinalities around it. Really cool feature to visualize the data that you've got in there. Now, moving from data, closely related to data is security and some of the new features. They don't usually do a lot of security releases from between wave and wave, but this one is coming in quite handy. And it has to do with maybe GDPR requirements, but also if you have some high-level security data that needs to be hidden by specific people, you can introduce that feature in a way similar to the field level security, but masking that data sort of at a lower level as well. So we'll allow you to hide that sensitive data, only allow a set of people to view it. And if someone goes and views this data, then that read is audited for fraud purposes to ensure that people are not nosy and then looking at data that is not supposed to be validated or viewed. But also linked to that one is the ability to stop people from extracting data from your environment. So you can specify some data that cannot be, bulk extracted and so on. So really cool security features. Now, from a pro dev perspective, this is where it starts getting a little bit, people that are hands-on, that are looking at how they can extend the platform. There's a couple of really cool features that have been announced. The first one is around ensuring that if you have a plugin that executes that require resources that are available in your private network, you can have a Dynamics 365 connect straight to your private endpoints without going out to the internet. This has been a problem for many years where we try to find ways of resolving that, but having Dynamics 365 as a cloud service and then exposing some of your other services into the cloud means that it goes through the internet, it goes through the public network. In order to avoid that, using the Azure infrastructure, you can have some private endpoints within your Azure data centers. And then that means that when you're connecting your plugins into those endpoints, it actually doesn't leave the perimeter of the data center. It goes from that Dynamics 365 server in, let's say, the Oceania region into that other server that also within the data center, same data center, or through a private endpoint that doesn't necessarily go through the internet or goes through a VPN connection, which means it's more secure and it's less susceptible to attacks. So really cool option available in there. That can also be used in case you've got some on-premise services that are sort of using express route or a private connection between the Azure data centers and your data center to have that connection without having to expose things to the internet. Really, really good security feature that is added in there. Now, also related to the pro dev environments, and this one is a big deal. I kid you not, we probably spent more than a day at the MVP Summit talking about that specific feature. And I'm so glad that it's been announced into the release notes in there. So think of it that way. Right now, the mechanism to actually deploy solutions from one environment to the other goes through exporting a zip file, extracting that zip file, putting it into source control, using pipelines to then convert that back into a zip file, and then moving that zip file from one environment to the other. What they're trying to do in here is leverage source control. So give you a connectivity between your Dataverse environment and your source control so that you bypass that solution extract, zip file, extract, unpack, repack, and then push into another environment and go straight between a Dataverse instance into your source code, and from that source code environment into your future instance, into your future Dataverse instance. So to me, this is a big deal, and it's by far one of the most exciting elements that has been announced part of this release. And we've talked extensively with the product team. They are super excited about it. They can see the energy coming from us. The only thing that I would say is that if you are under NDA, so if you are keen to actually give it a try and your organization has an NDA with Microsoft, try and reach out to see if you can tap into the public preview or the private preview even, or if you have an MVP part of your organization, go and talk to them about that. Microsoft is more than happy to extend the private preview to anybody that is under NDA and then allow you to provide some feedback onto that, because they need feedback to see how we can shape that product and push it. I know I'll be doing it with my team, but yeah, hopefully you can do it with your team as well, or reach out to some of the MVPs and ask them about some, that feature and how it's going to work. Once things are made public into the details of how it's going to work and how to set it up and so on, there's definitely going to be a lot of amplification in the community on, what an awesome feature this is and how to use it. Right, so before we go into sales and customer service, I'm just going to go a very quick demo, just going into a new environment. So I always forget the link to the PPAC, the Power Platform Admin Center. So if you're like me and then you forget what it is, aka.ms/PPAC, and then that will take you to the administration center in there, where you can go and have a look at your environments and so on. So just a very quick elements just to show you how you can enable some of those capabilities. This is my DXC tenancy, and I've got my own personal environments in there. You can just jump into those environments and go into your settings. There's a few things that I really want to show you on how to set up. So you go on the settings, and in there, once you got into the administration part, go to products and go first of all to behavior. So in order to get some of those Copilot capabilities enabled, part of model driven and the Power Platform, make sure that you select monthly channels as opposed to semi-annual channels. So rather than wave 1, wave 2, get the monthly channels, which means every month you're going to get updates into your environments that will enable some of those features. The other bit is to go into those feature section and have a look at anything that is highlighted as preview. So we've got Copilot in preview mode in here. This is enabled. And then this in here will also allow you to enable the AI assistance, part of Canvas, model driven, and some of the other parts of the Power Platform. So switch that on or set it to default on would be the better option. It may require a Copilot license depending on what you're doing, but just keep an eye on that. The other thing that I wanted to just highlight is just if I scroll down a little bit in here, There is a new capability. Let me see if I can find it. Enable content, advanced find, collaboration activities. This one, blocking unmanaged customization. So quite often you would get into one of the higher environments, let's say a pre-prod or production environment, and then you would have your managed solutions already deployed in there. And then sometimes people go, if they have the rights, they go and update a Power Automate, they go and update maybe a view or something that is part of that unmanaged solution. It is possible, part of the managed solution. It is possible to do that if you go into the default environment and then go and change those. What that is going to result into is creating an unmanaged layer into those higher environments. And then next time you do a release, your release will not reflect because there's an unmanaged layer that takes over that managed layer that you've already got deployed. In order to avoid that scenario, switch that feature on and it will stop people from doing unmanaged changes into those higher environments. Really cool feature, something to keep in mind, and it's relatively new into the environment. Right, so now that we've seen that, let me go back into my environment and I'm going to click on the link in here, which is going to take me to the actual app. So you're going to see the new look and feel. Again, you can toggle it on and off if you want to. You will notice that it has all those check boxes. So this is the first hint that this is in there, but also you've got Copilot now introduced part of your solution. So I'm in accounts right now and I've got 188 accounts. You can ask it a question like, how many accounts do I have? Now, those are some of the simple questions that I'm asking. Hopefully that it will get it right. Sometimes it does get it wrong. But you can do some analysis into your data. And it's actually quite clever. So if you're used to using the TDS endpoint, you have to think about how do I write my SQL query to query that data and get the information that I want. But now, just like in Power BI, you can explain what you want and it will give you this information. It could be something random, like what is the name of the account with the longest name, for example. Let's see if this is going to work, but it will go and look at the count of letters in your accounts and all the accounts, and it will tell you which one is the longest. And this is the longest. I think this is correct. You can do some further analysis. I think in one of the sessions that I did down in Christchurch, I was looking at context and I said, how many males do I have compared to females? What is the average age? You can do all sort of Copilot queries in order to get the information that you need out of your Dataverse. Really cool, just one natural language away from what you want to do. Right. So right now I'm into an account, so I just jumped in there, and I want to create a new email. And what I'm going to try and demonstrate in here is the capability that has been introduced in terms of just attachments. So the moment I save an email, it will give me that option to add attachments. They've got now new capabilities in here where you can add a new attachment. So let's say I select just an image in here and we'll go and add it in there, but you can also copy it and then paste it into another email that you're creating. Or even better, you can say add an attachment from a previous email and it will go and give you all the attachments that are associated with other emails. So details is the one that I've just created. There was first that I created before, and then there's another PDF in there, and you can search those attachments. So let's say, you have got a guide that you usually send people, or a standard terms of conditions that you want to always attach into your same email. They've enhanced the attachment capabilities so that you can actually easily find those without having to go back into your local machine or into your SharePoint and then retrieve this information from there. That's it from a really quick demo perspective. I'm going to switch back into my set of slides. So hopefully the last few slides, and then we'll finish on time at 5 o'clock. The first one is around Dynamics 365 sales. No surprise in there. Lots and lots of information about Copilot. So document summary is something that I discussed really quickly earlier on. It takes all the documents that are related to your sales events, so associated with a lead, associated with an account, and so on, summarizes them and allows you to query them, tells you what it's all about, and then answer questions that you have around a specific account. But also related to that, they've noticed that Copilot is such a central feature that people love it. They don't like that little sidebar on the side, and sometimes they want to enrich it with like diagrams and pictures and so on. So they give you now a first party experience where in your Dynamics Sales Hub, you can go into a link that says Copilot, and that gives you a full screen view of the Copilot prompt. And then you can go and ask it questions and then get some advanced graphics as well that will help you do your day-to-day work. In fact, yesterday I was having a chat with someone from the community, and they were saying that maybe the user interface is not relevant anymore. We don't want data on top of forms. We want to query the data and get relevant information, with Copilot being smart enough to either build a graph that would help us visualize that data, or maybe we can add some like cards in there that can format the data in a nice and attractive way that would help us summarize the information in there. So it's really an interesting step forward in terms of giving Copilot its own page, its own like dedicated space where you can go and interact with it and then get the information that we need. Sequence view is less related to AI, but gives you that option to understand how your account or your contact or your lead has progressed. How have you interacted with them? Like a timeline of things that you've done, and gives you a recommendation. Like, it may be a good idea to give them a call now or send them an email. Do you want to do that? Yes. What is the next best action? So give you that sequence view on how you can best interact with your customers and so on. Cool. And then switching into the customer service. Customer service is something that we use quite a lot, at least in Wellington, given that it's the public sector. A lot of it has to do with case management. And some of those features are related to that. So that's why I thought it might be a good idea to actually highlight them. One of the features that is a bit controversial is the creation of multiple cases when an email comes in. So I'll explain how that works. So you've got an email coming into your inbox, into your Outlook. That email may have a sender, and it will also have maybe someone that is CC'd and BCC'd. And each one of those could be related to a different mailbox that is monitored by Dynamics 365. And every time there would be a rule in those mailboxes that when you receive an email in there, go and create a case. Previously, we could only do that with, one case being created associated with the sender, with the to email, whereas now you can create multiple cases related to the same email that has arrived into your system. And that's related with another feature that they've announced, which is associated an activity with multiple related records. So on the records, there's an activity party, I think, and that will allow you to say there is actually multiple parties involved in that email. Just like we've got the regarding field that always has one value, now we can have that activity party that can have multiple values and say that email concerns that contact, that user, and that account, and it can link them all together and give you that view. This is something to keep an eye on. Some people don't really like that because it might proliferate into creating too many cases, or there might be actually some existing logic that is broken because you would always expect an email to be associated to one account. So something to keep in mind if you want to do a little bit of regression testing to understand how that works. Now that we've talked about all those features, I just want to conclude by highlighting a couple of deprecations. So hello to new features, goodbye to old features that are not being used. Some of the classic editors that we've used many times, we've loved and hated, are being deprecated. So especially around the model-driven, the classic model-driven editor is on its way into deprecation, and I think soon is going to be switched off, and you won't be able to access it anymore. Another one is the Dynamics 365 mobile app. That has been on its way out for a while and has been replaced by the Power Apps application that you can download on your mobile. So again, they want to get rid of the old one and unify it all under the Power Apps app. And then finally, rules in Canvas apps. I forgot about rules. I didn't use them that much. Most of them were already were experimental and so on. As you know, if you read the article that talks about the deprecation, they say that a lot of customers realize, or by querying customers, they realize that rules are confusing, and telemetry shows that not a lot of people are showing them. So they are phasing them out. Right now, you do have a toggle where you can switch them off if you want to, but eventually, they're going to leave the platform and disappear. So in a nutshell, just summarizing what we've covered. I'm glad it's 5 o'clock, so we're on the dot. We've covered some really cool features that were released part of the Wave 1 and also some of the recent announcements. So we've looked at Power Automate, we've looked at Copilot, some of the high-level Dataverse security data features as well. And then we concluded by just having a look at the sales app and the customer service. There's obviously way more that is available to be talked about, but we just give you a sort of quick dose, concentrated dose of some of those latest features that are in there. Keep in touch. We are part of the Wellington Power Platform user group. Next month, as I mentioned, we're going to have the Build After Party, where we're going to give you a concentrated dose of everything that was announced at Build that is specific to the Power Platform and Dynamics 365. Most of our events, if not all of them, are recorded and published into our YouTube channel. So go there, and then, hopefully you can follow us on the channels and give us a few likes. So thank you very much for that. Any questions? Do we have any questions on the call?
No questions so far, but I just pasted a link for Release Planner. Probably we can cover it some other time, but I have just pasted a link if people are interested to have a look at that. So yeah.
That sounds really good. All right, Shobhit, I want to thank you once again for participating. I really loved the session that you did. And it's always good to have you on with us and to share some of the love about the latest things that we're passionate about.
Thanks, Rami, and thanks everyone for joining in.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.